It is Christmas 1961. In Oxford, England, an undergraduate student returns home to his family for the holiday season. However, whilst enjoying the festivities, the young man falls over on several occasions and his family notice his speech is sometimes slurred. Over a year later, in 1963, the student is diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, a motor neuron disease. Doctors tell him he will only live for a few years. However, the young man is determined to prove them wrong and defy his condition. Flash forward a quarter of a century, and the same man, who can no longer walk or talk, has risen to become one of the world's greatest living physicists, having revolutionized the understanding of black holes and popularized physics more than any scientist before or since. The man's name? Stephen Hawking, the mind that defied a body. The man known to history as Stephen Hawking was born as Stephen William Hawking on the 8th of January 1942 in Oxford, England. His father was Frank Hawking, born in Yorkshire, England in 1905, a medical researcher who specialised in tropical diseases such as malaria, sleeping sickness and filariasis, illnesses that posed major public health problems in many parts of the world at the time, and Frank's work frequently took him abroad as he contributed to international efforts to study and combat them. His mother was Isabel Eileen Hawking, née Walker, born into a family of doctors in Glasgow, Scotland in 1915. A highly intelligent and independently minded woman who was among the few female students at Oxford University in the 1930s, where she studied philosophy, politics, and economics, a rare academic path for a woman of her generation and a reflection of her determination and intellect, but it would be through her position as a secretary in a medical research institute in London that she would meet Frank Hawking. They met shortly before the outbreak of the Second World War, a period marked by political unrest in Europe and growing concern over the rise of fascism. Their shared interest in politics, science, and social issues brought them together in what would become a strong and intellectually balanced marriage despite their contrasting temperaments. They married in 1941 and settled in Highgate, London, but as German bombing raids on the capital intensified, Isabel relocated to Oxford, where Stephen was born in January 1942. Not long after his birth, the family returned to the London area and eventually made their home in St Albans, Hertfordshire, where they raised 4 children: Stephen, Mary, born in 1943, Philippa, born in 1946, and Edward, who became a part of the Hawking family through adoption in 1955. The Hawking household was known for its intellectual atmosphere and unconventional habits, with meals often eaten in silence as everyone read books at the table. Both parents encouraged curiosity, critical thinking, and independent learning, creating an environment where academic achievement and deep discussion were valued far more than appearances or social conventions. Stephen Hawking spent most of his early childhood in St Albans, an historic market town located north of London, where the family moved after the end of the Second World War, and although the Hawkings lived in what was considered a relatively modest house by local standards, their home was filled with books, ideas, and constant conversation, providing a rich intellectual environment for a young and curious mind. From a very young age, Stephen displayed a keen interest in how things worked, often dismantling household objects and reassembling them just to understand the mechanisms within. Although he was not considered particularly outstanding in the early years of formal schooling, he was known for his sharp wit, strong reasoning skills, and an obvious capacity for abstract thinking, qualities which would later define his academic and scientific career. He began his education at the Byron House School in Highgate, London, a progressive school that emphasised creativity over rote learning, but after the family relocated, Stephen enrolled at St Albans High School for Girls, an unusual choice, but only because boys under the age of 10 were allowed to attend, and later he moved to Radlett School and then to St Albans School, one of the oldest schools in Britain, where he remained until he left for university. Though not always at the top of his class, Stephen developed a close circle of friends at St Albans School and enjoyed building elaborate board games and computers with them. During this time, he also showed a growing fascination with mathematics and physics, often engaging in complex discussions with his teachers and peers, and developing the early stages of what would become his lifelong focus on the laws that govern the universe. His father, however, had hoped Stephen would pursue medicine, following in his own professional footsteps, but Stephen was adamant that his talents and interests lay in mathematics and theoretical science, although his eventual path would be shaped in part by the fact that Oxford University did not offer a specialised undergraduate degree in mathematics at the time, forcing him to pivot slightly in his choice of subject. By the time Stephen completed his secondary education in 1959, at the age of 17, he had already developed a reputation as a deeply intelligent, if somewhat eccentric, student with an ability to solve difficult problems in unconventional ways and with strong academic results in physics and chemistry. He was awarded a scholarship to University College, Oxford, where his formal journey into advanced science would soon begin. In the autumn of 1959, at just 17 years old, Stephen Hawking began his undergraduate studies at University College, Oxford, reading physics and natural sciences, despite his desire to study mathematics, which was not offered as a dedicated undergraduate degree at the college, so physics became the closest alternative, and it would soon become clear that his abilities in the subject were nothing short of exceptional. Stephen initially found the academic workload at Oxford surprisingly light, and for much of his first year, he coasted through lectures with minimal effort, relying heavily on his natural aptitude for problem-solving and abstract thought, although he soon found more intellectual fulfillment through lively discussions with fellow students, late-night debates, and extracurricular pursuits including rowing, serving as a coxswain for the college boat team. He graduated with first-class honours in 1962, but only narrowly, as his examiners were uncertain whether to award him a first or a second-class degree. In his oral examination, he impressed them with his brilliance and with his confident responses, ultimately securing a first, which opened the door for postgraduate study at the University of Cambridge, where he would begin research in cosmology under the supervision of Dennis Sharma, one of the leading British physicists of the time. Soon after arriving in Cambridge in late 1962, Stephen began to notice troubling signs with his physical coordination. He became unusually clumsy, experienced difficulty with tasks like tying his shoelaces, and began to slur his speech slightly, symptoms which grew steadily worse, prompting concern among his family and friends. In 1963, at the age of 21, after a series of troubling symptoms and inconclusive tests, Stephen Hawking received a diagnosis that would change the course and define much of his life. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, also known as motor neuron disease, MND, which is progressive, degenerative, and, at the time, incurable, attacking the nerve cells that control voluntary muscle movement, with doctors giving him a bleak prognosis of 2, perhaps 3 years to live, and advising him to prepare for a rapid physical decline. The news came as a crushing blow, as Stephen had just begun his postgraduate studies at Cambridge and was surrounded by some of the most brilliant minds in British science. His world, once filled with intellectual promise and youthful optimism, suddenly narrowed into a future shaped by physical limitation and the constant shadow of mortality, leaving him overwhelmed and entering a period of deep depression, withdrawing from academic work, avoiding social activities, and spending much of his time alone. He later admitted that during this time he struggled with feelings of futility, unsure whether to continue his studies or even make plans at all. Yet it was during this period of profound uncertainty that Stephen met Jane Wilde, a bright and thoughtful student of languages at Westfield College, London, having been introduced through mutual friends at a party held over the Christmas holidays. Jane was immediately struck by Stephen's sharp mind, dry wit, and intense curiosity, while Stephen, despite his growing sense of isolation, found comfort in Jane's gentle but determined spirit, and, while their connection was quiet at first, shaped more by long conversations than overt displays of affection, it quickly deepened into something stronger. As Stephen's illness progressed and his speech began to slur, Jane made the decision to stand by him as she saw in him not a man bound for tragedy, but one whose brilliance and humour could still light up a room, and against the advice of some who believed she was taking on too great a burden, Jane committed herself to supporting him, and, in doing so, gave Stephen something vital: the sense that his life, however uncertain, was still worth living. Their early courtship was tender and determined, spent exchanging letters, walking and talking, and finding solace in the ordinary joys of companionship, with Jane's devout Anglican faith giving her the strength to face what lay ahead, and her quiet optimism was a powerful counterweight to Stephen's existential dread, as her belief in him helped restore his sense of purpose. In time, Stephen began to re-engage with his studies, returning to his cosmological research with renewed energy, and his intellectual life, so nearly extinguished, began to flourish once more. By 1965, Hawking had proposed to Jane, and they married on the 14th of July 1965, forming a partnership that would sustain him through the early years of his illness, allowing him to continue his work with determination and focus, even as his body continued to deteriorate. Despite the progression of his illness, Stephen Hawking pressed forward with his doctoral research at Cambridge, focusing on the nature of the universe, the origins of time, and the behavior of black holes, topics that were not only cutting edge, but also fundamental to the field of theoretical physics, and, under the guidance of Dennis Sharma, Hawking soon began to emerge as a bold and original thinker. His doctoral thesis, completed in 1966, was entitled Properties of Expanding Universes, and in it he examined the mathematical structure of the cosmos by applying the equations of general relativity, building on the work of earlier theorists such as Alexander Friedmann and Roger Penrose, whose own work on gravitational singularities would deeply influence Hawking's thinking. In the mid-1960s, Hawking began working closely with Penrose, a brilliant British mathematician and physicist, and together they developed what became known as the Penrose-Hawking singularity theorems, which demonstrated that under certain conditions, general relativity predicts the existence of singularities, points in space-time where gravitational forces cause matter to have infinite density, such as at the centre of black holes or at the beginning of the universe itself. These groundbreaking ideas challenged earlier assumptions about the uniform nature of the universe and provided compelling theoretical support for the Big Bang theory, which proposed that the universe had a definite beginning in time. Hawking's ability to make sense of these complex and abstract ideas using elegant mathematical arguments gained him increasing recognition within the scientific community. Between 1965 and 1970, Stephen Hawking developed a series of groundbreaking singularity theorems that would become some of his most influential early contributions to theoretical physics by building on the mathematical framework of general relativity and working in collaboration with British mathematician Roger Penrose. Hawking used complex equations to show that under certain realistic conditions, the universe must contain singularities, points in space-time where gravity becomes infinite and the known laws of physics cease to operate. These singularities were not just theoretical curiosities. Hawking demonstrated that they were an inevitable feature of the universe's evolution, occurring both at the centre of black holes and at the origin of the universe itself, the so-called Big Bang. His work provided strong mathematical backing for the idea that time and space had a beginning, challenging the view that the universe had always existed in a steady state. In the midst of his rising academic career and deepening research into the origins of the universe, Stephen Hawking experienced a profound personal milestone in 1967 with the birth of his first child, Robert, bringing joy and a sense of normality to a life increasingly shaped by illness and professional intensity. Both Stephen and Jane embraced parenthood with enthusiasm, despite the many logistical challenges they faced. Jane, who was continuing her own academic pursuits at the time, managed much of the caregiving, while Stephen remained actively involved, even as his mobility and speech steadily declined. The presence of a child in the household helped ground the couple amid the growing pressures of Hawking's care needs and scientific responsibilities, and it marked the beginning of a new phase in their shared journey. In 1968, Hawking joined the Institute of Astronomy at Cambridge, and in 1970, despite increasing reliance on a wheelchair and requiring more daily assistance, he made a major scientific breakthrough alongside Roger Penrose, publishing foundational work on the nature of gravitational singularities. Together, they demonstrated that under general conditions, the collapse of massive stars would lead inevitably to singularities at the center of black holes, and that the universe itself must have originated from such a singular point. In 1970, Stephen and Jane welcomed the birth of their second child, Lucy Hawking, further expanding their young family even as Stephen's physical condition deteriorated. But it was during this intensely busy and challenging period that Stephen, working independently, made another major breakthrough. In 1971, he published what became known as the black hole area theorem. This profound theoretical insight stated that the surface area of a black hole's event horizon, or the boundary beyond which nothing, not even light, can escape, could never decrease over time, even as the black hole absorbed matter or merged with another, and this result resembled the second law of thermodynamics, which holds that entropy must always increase in a closed system. The true significance of this similarity would only become clear a few years later when he made his next major breakthrough. This major breakthrough came in 1974, when Hawking proposed what would become one of his most famous contributions to physics, suggesting that black holes were not entirely black, but could emit tiny amounts of thermal radiation due to quantum effects near the event horizon, a phenomenon soon known as the Hawking radiation. Although controversial at first, this idea merged the principles of general relativity, quantum mechanics, and thermodynamics in a way that fundamentally reshaped scientific understanding of black holes and the universe itself. That same year, in recognition of his groundbreaking theoretical work, including the prediction of Hawking radiation, Stephen Hawking was elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society, one of the highest distinctions in British science, and at just 32 years old, he joined the ranks of an elite institution that had counted among its members such towering figures as Isaac Newton, Charles Darwin, and Albert Einstein. By this point, his physical condition had deteriorated markedly. He required assistance to walk, and his speech had become increasingly difficult to understand, yet his intellectual output showed no sign of slowing. His ability to continue producing world-class research while coping with a severely debilitating illness inspired admiration from peers and the public alike. Throughout the 1970s, Professor Stephen Hawking began to attract widespread international attention, not only within the scientific community, but also among the wider public, as his groundbreaking ideas about black holes, singularities, and the origin of the universe captured imaginations across the globe, and this decade marked the beginning of his transformation from a respected academic to a global scientific figure, as he accumulated a series of prestigious awards that recognized the depth and originality of his work. In 1975, he was honored with the Eddington Medal by the Royal Astronomical Society for outstanding contributions to theoretical astrophysics, and the following year, he received the Hughes Medal from the Royal Society, affirming his status among Britain's foremost scientists. But it was in 1978 that his growing stature was even more emphatically confirmed when he was awarded the Albert Einstein Award, one of the highest distinctions in theoretical physics. In 1979, Hawking's reputation was further solidified with the Albert Einstein Medal, recognizing his profound contributions to black hole physics and cosmology, and that same year he was appointed to the prestigious Lucasian Professorship of Mathematics at Cambridge, once held by Sir Isaac Newton, confirming his place as one of the leading theoretical physicists of his generation. That year, Stephen and Jane also welcomed the birth of their third child, Timothy Hawking, completing their family of 5, and although Stephen's illness had significantly progressed by this time, requiring assistance for most physical tasks, he remained determined to continue not only with his demanding academic work, but also with his role as a father. Despite the growing physical challenges he faced, Stephen Hawking maintained a close and loving relationship with his children, Robert, Lucy, and later Timothy, and was known within the family for his dry sense of humour and playful spirit, which often delighted the children and brought warmth to the home. Although he could not join in physical activities, he remained deeply engaged in their intellectual and emotional development, encouraging their curiosity and exploration of the world around them. At the centre of the Hawking household was Jane Hawking, who took on the immense task of managing Stephen's growing care needs, organising medical support, coordinating assistance, and adapting their home to meet his physical challenges, while at the same time raising 3 children, often almost single-handedly, and pursuing her own academic and musical interests whenever time allowed. As Stephen's fame grew through the 1970s and 1980s, the pressure on Jane only increased, and although the household was often chaotic and unconventional, it was bound by a spirit of perseverance and love, with Jane later reflecting that while life with Stephen could be overwhelming, she never doubted the importance of his work or the value of the family they had built together. By the early 1980s, Stephen Hawking had become a leading figure in the field of theoretical physics, known not only for his important contributions to cosmology, but also for his determination to continue working in spite of the progression of his motor neurone disease, and although he had now lost the ability to speak clearly and relied on others for day-to-day care, his research output remained prolific, and his desire to bring science to a wider audience grew stronger. In 1982, Stephen Hawking was appointed a Commander of the Order of the British Empire, CBE, by Queen Elizabeth II, one of the United Kingdom's most distinguished civilian honours, which recognised his exceptional services to theoretical physics and his rising prominence as a national figure in British intellectual life. By this time, Hawking had already achieved global renown for his work on black holes and cosmology, and the CBE served as formal acknowledgement from the British state of his contributions to science and education. In 1985, Stephen Hawking was awarded the Gold Medal of the Royal Astronomical Society, the highest honour bestowed by the institution and one of the most prestigious scientific awards in the world, having been established in 1824 and previously awarded to such towering figures as Edwin Hubble and Albert Einstein. This recognition was given to Hawking for his groundbreaking contributions to cosmology and gravitation, particularly his pioneering work on black holes, singularities, and the fundamental nature of the universe itself, and the award marked another major milestone in his ascent as one of the most important scientific thinkers of the modern age. That same year, while visiting CERN in Geneva, Stephen Hawking contracted a severe case of pneumonia, a condition that posed a grave risk due to his already fragile respiratory system, and as his condition rapidly deteriorated, doctors placed him on a ventilator to keep him alive, a move that forced difficult decisions about his future, with his condition becoming so critical that doctors discussed the possibility of withdrawing life support. But Jane insisted that Stephen's mind was still active and that his life was worth fighting for. To save his life, doctors performed a tracheotomy, a surgical procedure that involved removing part of his windpipe, which resulted in the permanent loss of his natural speaking voice, with many fearing that this would mark the end of his public and academic life, as the inability to communicate verbally seemed to exclude him from lecturing, teaching, and writing, all central to his role and identity as a scientist and communicator. For a time, he communicated painfully slowly by raising his eyebrows to select letters from a spelling card, a laborious and exhausting process that required immense patience from both Stephen and those around him. And although he was able to form words and sentences, it often took several minutes just to express a simple thought, creating enormous challenges not only for his academic work, but also for his personal interactions. Later, in 1985, a breakthrough came when Walter Wolters, an American computer programmer whose mother-in-law had been diagnosed with motor neurone disease, sent Hawking a copy of a software program he had developed called Equalizer, a system that allowed users to select words and phrases on a computer screen using simple movements, and, for the first time since his tracheotomy, Stephen was able to construct full sentences again with greater ease, restoring a critical part of his independence. Around the same time, David Mason, a British engineer, adapted this system to be mounted directly onto Stephen's wheelchair and fitted it with a speech synthesizer operated by hand that could convert the selected words into a computerized voice. And although the voice was mechanical and distinctly American in tone, it soon became one of the most iconic aspects of Hawking's public persona, allowing him to continue lecturing and writing. It was during this period that David's wife, Elaine Mason, a trained nurse specializing in the care of individuals with severe physical disabilities, became one of Hawking's primary carers, and her arrival brought a new level of professional expertise to his daily support, as she was not only highly skilled in managing complex medical needs, but also accustomed to working with patients who faced profound communication challenges, and over time, Elaine became an increasingly important presence within Hawking's care team, offering both medical assistance and a practical understanding of the unique difficulties he faced as his condition progressed. After a period of intense health struggles and adjustment, Stephen Hawking and his family suffered a significant personal loss in 1986 when his father, Frank Hawking, passed away at the age of 80. And although Frank did not live to see his son become a worldwide icon, he had witnessed Stephen overcome immense challenges and build a remarkable academic reputation through his groundbreaking contributions to cosmology and theoretical physics. Stephen's relationship with his father was complex, yet deeply formative, as Frank Hawking, known for his reserved and somewhat detached emotional style, nevertheless profoundly shaped Stephen through his unwavering intellectual rigour, commitment to rational inquiry, and quiet perseverance. And although their interactions often lacked open displays of affection, they were bound by mutual respect and a shared passion for scientific exploration. In 1988, Professor Hawking published A Brief History of Time, From the Big Bang to Black Holes, and although written for a general audience, it explored profound topics such as the origin of the universe, the nature of time, black holes, and the possibility of a unified theory of physics. Remarkably, the book became a global bestseller, spending more than 200 weeks on the Sunday Times bestseller list and eventually selling over 25 million copies worldwide. The book's success made Hawking a household name and brought him fame on a level few scientists ever achieve, and although many readers admitted they found the content challenging, it was widely praised for making complex scientific ideas accessible, or at least visible, to the general public, and for igniting curiosity about the universe in people who had never studied physics before. That same year, Stephen Hawking was awarded the prestigious Wolf Prize in Physics, one of the most significant international honours in the scientific world, presented by the Wolf Foundation in Israel to recognise achievements that contribute to humanity and deepen our understanding of the universe. Hawking received the prize jointly with American physicist Roger Penrose in recognition of their pioneering work on gravitational singularities and black holes. The research had fundamentally reshaped theoretical physics and produced the famous Penrose-Hawking singularity theorems. This showed that the universe must have originated from a singular point and that black holes are governed by well-defined physical laws. The award not only highlighted the brilliance of Hawking's mind, but also affirmed the enduring impact of his early work. This, coupled with the release of A Brief History of Time, cemented his position at the very forefront of modern science. In 1989, Stephen Hawking was appointed to the Order of the Companions of Honour by Queen Elizabeth II, a rare and distinguished accolade limited to only 65 living members and awarded to individuals who have made outstanding contributions to the arts, science, medicine or government, with Hawking's inclusion reflecting his achievements in science and his role advancing knowledge and sharing complex ideas with the public. By 1990, the long and often complicated marriage between Stephen and Jane Hawking came to an end, as the relentless pressures of Stephen's deteriorating health, rising public celebrity, and growing care needs proved too great a burden to bear. For over 2 decades, Jane had acted not only as a wife, but as a caregiver, organizer, and emotional anchor, raising their 3 children largely on her own, and although there remained a deep mutual respect between them, their home life had, in Jane's own words, become a battlefield due to widening emotional distance. Around this time, Stephen Hawking formed a close relationship with his nurse, Elaine Mason, a woman with a strong personality and a background in working with individuals with complex disabilities, and she soon became a central figure in Stephen's personal life following his separation from Jane. After Elaine's own separation from her husband, David Mason, their relationship quickly deepened into a romantic one, with Elaine assuming a prominent role not only within Stephen's care team, but also at the heart of his household. The relationship generated considerable controversy and was met with mixed reactions from the public and those closest to Stephen, as some praised Elaine for her devotion and believed she gave Stephen renewed energy and independence at a time when his condition had grown increasingly severe, while others, including members of Stephen's family and longtime friends, expressed concern over the intensity and exclusivity of the relationship, and, over time, contact between Stephen and some family members became strained. In 1995, following the finalization of his divorce from Jane Wilde, Stephen Hawking married Elaine Mason in a private ceremony held in Cambridge, attended by a small group of close associates, although many of Stephen's colleagues and family members were notably absent due to the ongoing tensions that had developed since his separation from Jane. The marriage was marked by a degree of privacy, with fewer public appearances alongside his children and previous associates, and although Stephen continued to travel, write, and engage in public life, the tone of his domestic world became more insular. Nevertheless, during this time, he remained as intellectually active as ever, continuing to work on some of his most ambitious theories and contributing to popular science literature. Following the success of A Brief History of Time, Professor Stephen Hawking became a household name, appearing in interviews, documentaries, and television specials, and throughout the 1990s he continued to write, lecture internationally, and use his platform to advocate for scientific education, disability support, and public engagement with questions about time, space, and existence. His public presence, alongside his dry sense of humor and sharp intellect, challenged preconceptions about disability, making him instantly recognizable beyond academic circles, eventually venturing into popular entertainment, making memorable guest appearances as himself in episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, The Simpsons, and Futurama, where he was portrayed affectionately, further cementing his place as both a scientific icon and a beloved figure in popular culture. However, Hawking's venture into the limelight had not dulled his scientific mind, as in the late 1990s and early 2000s, he, alongside physicist James Hartle, developed and later introduced a bold new approach to understanding the universe known as top-down cosmology, a theory which challenged the traditional view that the universe had a single linear history beginning with the Big Bang. Instead, Hawking and Hartle proposed that the universe's history should be understood retrospectively from the standpoint of what we observe in the present, and, according to this view, rather than evolving from one fixed starting point, the universe could have had multiple possible histories, each compatible with the laws of quantum mechanics. Our current reality, they suggested, is not shaped by a singular past, but by all the different possible paths the universe could have taken to reach its present state. This approach opened up novel ways to interpret cosmological phenomena, particularly in the context of the multiverse, where countless universes with varying properties might exist simultaneously, and although top-down cosmology remained highly abstract, it was widely seen as an elegant attempt to bridge quantum theory and general relativity, reflecting Hawking's lifelong pursuit of a so-called theory of everything, a unified framework that could explain the fundamental workings of the universe in its entirety. In 2001, Stephen Hawking published The Universe in a Nutshell, a follow-up of sorts to his earlier bestseller A Brief History of Time, aimed once again at helping a general audience understand the deepest questions of modern cosmology. The book explored a range of complex subjects, including quantum mechanics, superstring theory, brain cosmology, and the concept of multiple dimensions, topics often confined to academic papers, but which Hawking now sought to explain with clarity, accessibility, and visual elegance. Lavishly illustrated and written in a more accessible tone than his earlier work, The Universe in a Nutshell was well received by the public, fortuitously, as it was designed to help readers grasp the intricate relationships between time, space, gravity, and the ultimate structure of the universe. In it, Hawking introduced cutting-edge ideas using vivid metaphors and visual diagrams to make the abstract seem tangible and to bring the frontiers of theoretical physics within reach of a wider audience. In 2004, Stephen Hawking stunned the scientific community when he publicly conceded a long-standing bet made in the 1990s over the so-called black hole information paradox, a debate concerning whether information that falls into a black hole is lost forever or somehow preserved. And although Hawking had famously argued that the information was irretrievably lost, this view conflicted with the principles of quantum mechanics, which insist that information must be conserved. Hawking had even formalized the disagreement with a friendly wager against American physicist John Preskill, promising that if he were wrong, he would present Preskill with a complete set of encyclopedias, and at the 17th International Conference on General Relativity and Gravitation, held in Dublin, Hawking dramatically reversed his earlier position, stating that he now believed information could, in theory, escape from black holes through the subtle quantum effects, and true to his word, he presented Preskill with an encyclopedia set. At the same time as Hawking was at the forefront of science in 2004, unexpectedly, he appeared on the front of several British newspapers, which reported that Cambridgeshire police had opened an inquiry into concerns about Hawking's welfare after caregivers observed unexplained injuries, and although no formal allegations were made by Stephen himself, reports suggested that some staff members feared Hawking's second wife, Elaine, may have been responsible. Stephen issued a public statement denying any mistreatment and asserting that he had not been assaulted, and although the investigation attracted considerable media attention at the time, no charges were filed, and the case was closed after police cited insufficient evidence, plus Hawking's refusal to pursue any formal complaint, stating, "I have not been assaulted in any way by my wife." In 2006, Professor Hawking soon gained more positive attention as he was awarded the Copley Medal by the Royal Society, the oldest scientific prize in the world dating back to 1731. This prestigious medal, previously bestowed upon luminaries such as Charles Darwin, Michael Faraday, and Albert Einstein, recognized Hawking's outstanding achievements in scientific research and confirmed his place among the most influential scientific minds in history. Hawking received the honour in recognition of his exceptional contributions to theoretical physics and cosmology, particularly his work on black hole thermodynamics, the nature of singularities, and the quantum structure of the universe. The award represented a crowning moment in his long relationship with the Royal Society, which had first elected him as a Fellow more than 3 decades earlier. However, Hawking's personal life once again returned to the tabloids in 2006 as his second marriage to Elaine Mason broke down after 11 years, but he never publicly explained the reasons why, choosing to remain intensely private about his personal affairs, particularly after the intense media attention that followed the 2004 police investigation into allegations of mistreatment. The allegations were publicly denied. No charges were ever brought, and Stephen continued to maintain that there had been no wrongdoing. Despite this, tensions within the marriage had been widely reported for several years by members of his care team, academic colleagues, and even close family. And during this period, there were growing concerns that Hawking had become increasingly isolated, both personally and professionally, as Elaine Mason assumed a dominant role in managing much of his daily life. By the time of their separation in 2006, it was clear that the emotional and relational strain had taken a toll on Stephen's once broader support network. Following the separation from Elaine Mason, Stephen Hawking gradually began to rebuild his relationship with his 3 children, Robert, Lucy, and Timothy, who were now adults, each forging their own paths in life. Robert, the eldest, had pursued a career in software engineering and was living in the United States with his own young family. Lucy had become a successful journalist and author, known particularly for her children's science fiction books aimed at making complex scientific ideas accessible to young readers. It was around this time that she began collaborating with her father on a new series of novels beginning with George's Secret Key to the Universe in 2007, blending storytelling with real scientific concepts. Timothy, the youngest, had taken roles in education and corporate work and remained a quieter presence but maintained close ties with the family, and as Stephen's physical condition required increasing care, his children began to take a more active role in supporting his daily needs and in helping to manage his public appearances, travel, and professional commitments. Stephen also renewed his friendship with Jane Hawking, not as a romantic partner, but as a trusted confidant and long-time companion who had shared the most formative and challenging years of his life. By this time, Jane had remarried in 1997 to Jonathan Hellier-Jones, a musician and family friend who had been a source of support during her most difficult years caring for Stephen. Despite the complexities of their past, Stephen and Jane maintained a cordial and at times affectionate relationship in his later years, occasionally appearing together at public events and family gatherings. Their renewed connection brought a sense of closure and continuity to a family that had, at times, been tested by strain and distance, and for Hawking, these final years were marked not only by ongoing scientific engagement, but also by a quieter, more grounded sense of personal reconciliation and familial closeness. In 2007, Stephen Hawking fulfilled a lifelong dream when he experienced weightlessness during a zero-gravity flight aboard a specially modified Boeing 727 aircraft operated by Zero Gravity Corporation in the United States. The flight, which took off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, involved a series of steep parabolic maneuvers that simulated the sensation of microgravity, allowing Hawking to float freely above his wheelchair for brief intervals. Photographs of the event showing Hawking smiling as he hovered mid-air with the assistance of flight staff quickly spread across the globe alongside his message that life on Earth was vulnerable to disasters, both natural and man-made, and that colonizing other planets would, eventually, become a necessity. In 2008, Stephen Hawking founded the Centre for Theoretical Cosmology at the University of Cambridge, an institute dedicated to advancing research into the fundamental laws of the universe. The centre aimed to foster collaboration across disciplines, bridging cosmology, quantum gravity and particle physics, while also supporting the next generation of theoretical physicists through cutting-edge research and education. Hawking envisioned the CTC as a hub where the biggest questions in physics could be explored in depth, such as the nature of space-time, the origin of the universe, and the unification of general relativity and quantum theory, and although his health increasingly limited his mobility, Hawking remained actively involved in shaping the centre's mission and lent it the full weight of his global reputation. In 2009, Stephen Hawking was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States, by President Barack Obama. The ceremony, held at the White House, recognized individuals who had made extraordinary contributions to the security or national interests of the United States, to world peace, or to cultural and other significant public or private endeavors, with Hawking being honored for his profound impact on science, education, and the global imagination. Hawking was honored not only for his groundbreaking work in cosmology and theoretical physics, but also for his tireless commitment to public education, his advocacy for people with disabilities, and his role in promoting scientific understanding around the world. When presenting the award, President Obama praised him as someone who had overcome the odds and expanded our understanding of the universe. In 2010, Stephen Hawking co-authored a provocative and widely discussed book entitled The Grand Design, working alongside physicist and author Leonard Mlodinow. The book set out to explore some of the most fundamental questions in science and philosophy, such as, what is the nature of reality? Why is there something rather than nothing? And perhaps most controversially, is it necessary to invoke God to explain the creation of the universe? Building on developments in quantum theory and string theory, Hawking and Mlodinow presented a bold and simplified version of a theory of everything, introducing readers to advanced concepts. According to the authors, these advances in theoretical physics showed that the laws of the universe could arise spontaneously from nothing without the need for a divine creator, a claim that sparked widespread media attention and considerable debate. Hawking's assertion within the book that philosophy is dead and that science now held the answers to life's biggest questions drew both admiration and criticism, with theologians, philosophers, and scientists weighing in from all sides. Nevertheless, the book became an international bestseller, praised for its clarity and ambition, and it solidified Hawking's position not only as a scientific thinker, but also as a public intellectual unafraid to challenge traditional beliefs. The grand design was a continuation of Hawking's lifelong mission to make the deepest and most complex aspects of the cosmos understandable to a general audience, and to stimulate discussion about humanity's place in the universe, not just through equations, but through ideas that touched on existence itself. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, Stephen Hawking remained intellectually active and firmly embedded within the global scientific community, continuing to publish, lecture, and collaborate despite his increasingly severe physical limitations. As Director of Research at the CTC, Hawking focused his attention on some of the deepest unresolved problems in modern physics, particularly the reconciliation of general relativity with quantum mechanics. Hawking continued to investigate the black hole information paradox, proposing that information could be preserved at the event horizon, and he revisited his earlier no-boundary proposal with James Hartle, refining it in the light of multiverse models, and although he no longer published at the same pace as in earlier decades, he remained active in research, mentoring students, co-authoring papers, and contributing to major scientific debates. In 2012, Stephen Hawking took centre stage at the opening ceremony of the London Paralympic Games, delivering a powerful pre-recorded message that set the tone for the entire event and celebrated the human capacity to transcend physical limits. Projected across the stadium and broadcast to millions around the world, Hawking's voice urged audiences to look up at the stars, not down at your feet. The same year, Stephen Hawking was honoured with the Special Fundamental Physics Prize, a $3 million Lifetime Achievement Award established by Yuri Milner to recognise monumental contributions to theoretical physics. The following year, he received the inaugural Breakthrough Prize in Fundamental Physics, created by Milner, Sergey Brin, Mark Zuckerberg and others to raise the global profile of pioneering scientists. These awards recognized Hawking's groundbreaking work on black hole thermodynamics, Hawking radiation, and quantum gravity, and praised his profound influence not only on modern cosmology, but also on the public understanding of science, reflecting a career that reshaped humanity's conception of the universe. Stephen Hawking's mother, Isabel Hawking, passed away in 2013 at the age of 98, having lived a long and intellectually rich life, and throughout Stephen's life she remained a steady and supportive presence, an anchor in both his early development and later success, as from a young age Stephen was deeply influenced by her sharp mind, strong will, and independent thinking, qualities that she herself had exhibited as one of the few women to attend Oxford University in the 1930s. She built a home where books, ideas, and debate were valued above convention, helping to spark Stephen's early fascination with the universe, and as his fame grew, Isabel remained a quiet source of strength, staying close to her grandchildren and attending public events. Although she never sought the spotlight, those close to Stephen knew her influence on his intellectual and moral outlook was profound, making her passing the end of a deeply meaningful bond. In 2014, Stephen Hawking's extraordinary life was brought to the big screen with the release of The Theory of Everything, a biographical drama based on the memoir Travelling to Infinity, My Life with Stephen by Jane Hawking. The film chronicled Stephen's early academic brilliance, his devastating diagnosis with motor neurone disease, and the evolving dynamics of his marriage to Jane, portraying both the triumphs and struggles that shaped his remarkable journey. Eddie Redmayne, who portrayed Hawking, received widespread acclaim for capturing both his intellectual fire and physical decline with remarkable accuracy, winning the Academy Award for Best Actor along with a BAFTA and Golden Globe. Redmayne credited Stephen's feedback as essential to shaping the role, with Hawking himself praising the film and noting that at times he felt he was watching himself, especially as the filmmakers used his actual computer-generated voice to add authenticity. In 2017, Stephen Hawking celebrated his 75th birthday, an extraordinary milestone for a man once given just a few years to live. To mark the occasion, the University of Cambridge hosted a major international scientific conference in his honour, bringing together many of the world's leading physicists, cosmologists and academics to pay tribute to his life's work and his enduring influence on modern science. The conference, entitled Gravity and Black Holes, featured lectures and presentations that built upon the themes and discoveries Hawking had spent a lifetime exploring, including quantum gravity, black hole thermodynamics, and the nature of singularities, and it served as both a celebration of his legacy and a forward-looking examination of the questions that remained at the frontiers of theoretical physics. Hawking gave a speech at the event, delivered through his voice synthesizer, reflecting on the progress of science during his lifetime, his hopes for the future of humanity, and his belief in the power of the human mind, and while his 75th birthday marked a personal milestone, it was also a powerful reminder of how he had defied his initial prognosis and the physical adversities he faced throughout his life. Stephen Hawking died peacefully at his home in Cambridge, England on the 14th of March 2018 at the age of 76, a life far longer than the 2 to 3 years doctors had predicted when he was diagnosed with motor neurone disease at 21, and his passing marked the end of one of the most extraordinary scientific journeys of the modern age. The date of his death held poignant significance. It was Pi Day, celebrated around the world by mathematicians, and also the birthday of Albert Einstein, one of the greatest minds in the history of science, whose legacy had often intersected with Hawking's own. The parallels were not lost on the public, with tributes pouring in from every corner of the globe. World leaders, fellow scientists, celebrities, and institutions across science, technology, and education paid homage to Hawking's life, with many praising not just his intellectual contributions, but also his courage, resilience, and humour in the face of overwhelming personal challenges. The Vatican issued a statement honouring his work. NASA expressed gratitude for his cosmic insights, and flags were flown at half-mast in academic circles. His funeral took place on the 31st of March 2018 at Great St Mary's Church in Cambridge, attended by family, friends, and distinguished figures from academia and public life. The service reflected both the deep affection and immense respect he commanded across the world, with crowds gathering outside to pay their final respects, while inside tributes were paid to his extraordinary life and contributions to science. His ashes were later interred at Westminster Abbey on the 15th of June 2018, placed between the graves of Sir Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin, two of the greatest scientists and contributors to scientific history whose legacy Hawking had unquestionably joined, cementing his place among the greatest thinkers Britain has ever produced. In October 2018, just months after his death, Stephen Hawking's final book was published under the title Brief Answers to the Big Questions. This was compiled from his personal archives and unfinished essays, and completed with the help of colleagues, family, and long-time collaborators. The book served as a sort of intellectual legacy, a final message from one of the greatest minds of the modern era, tackling some of the most profound and urgent questions facing humanity. The tone of the book was characteristically clear, bold, and thought-provoking, and while it did not claim to offer definitive answers, it laid out Hawking's views in a way that was both accessible and deeply reflective, as he expressed concern about climate change, unchecked technological advancement, and the long-term survival of the human species, reiterating his belief that humanity must eventually look beyond Earth if it is to endure. The book became an international bestseller, widely praised for distilling complex topics into simple, readable language while retaining the depth of Hawking's insight. For many readers, Brief Answers to the Big Questions felt like a personal farewell, both a warning about the future and a celebration of the curious, daring intellect that had reshaped humanity's understanding of the universe. Stephen Hawking's life was one of extraordinary contrasts. A man bound to a wheelchair who explored the furthest reaches of the universe, a scientist who could not speak, yet who communicated some of the most profound ideas in human history, and a figure whose physical fragility was overcome by a profound spiritual strength and resilience. From the quiet streets of St. Albans to the halls of Cambridge and the world stage, he became a beacon of human potential, reminding us all that the limits of the body are no match for the power of the mind. In evaluating his scientific contributions, scholars continue to debate the full impact of Hawking radiation and his quest for a theory of everything, but there is near universal agreement that his work fundamentally altered our understanding of black holes, time, and the origins of the universe. His ability to bridge general relativity and quantum mechanics helped lay the foundation for future research in quantum gravity and string theory. Many of his most famous theories, from Hawking radiation to the no-boundary proposal, remain unproven, not because they lack merit, but because the tools to test them have not yet been invented. Yet Hawking fully acknowledged this gap between theoretical elegance and empirical confirmation, often describing his work as a map towards truths that future generations might uncover. While Hawking was widely admired, his career was not without criticism of some of his public comments, such as his warnings about the existential risks of artificial intelligence. These were viewed by some as visionary and by others as speculative, and a few critics within academia argued that his immense celebrity sometimes eclipsed his more cautious scientific output, especially as theories like the multiverse or no-boundary proposal remained untestable. Nevertheless, even without empirical proof, Hawking's ideas pushed the boundaries of accepted thinking, sparking new debates and encouraging others to imagine boldly. And he never shied away from life's largest questions, challenging traditional beliefs about God, existence, and the cosmos itself, and staking his place in the timeless conversation between science and meaning. Alongside figures such as Carl Sagan, Hawking became one of the most influential popularizers of science in the modern era, and through books such as A Brief History of Time, public lectures, interviews, and cameo appearances on television, he helped bring ideas like black holes, time travel, and the origin of the universe into everyday conversation. What set him apart was not only the depth of the tackling of his subject matter, but his ability to show that science could be both wondrous and accessible. Though often portrayed through the lens of fame and scientific genius, those closest to Stephen Hawking described him as witty, fiercely independent, and deeply determined. And his children spoke of a father who encouraged their curiosity and embraced humour even in the most difficult moments. While colleagues recalled a man with an astonishing memory, a sharp tongue, and an insistence on precision in both thought and language. Despite his physical constraints, Hawking remained actively engaged in his relationships and work, often surprising those around him with his stamina and intellectual appetite. He could be private and guarded, but also warm and generous with those who knew him best, and his resilience left a lasting impression not only on the public, but on all who shared in his remarkable journey. He defied a diagnosis that gave him just a few years to live, surviving more than 5 decades with a disease that would have silenced most, proving that the limits of life are not defined by the body, but by the mind and will. Even as his body weakened, his mind remained a laboratory of its own, collaborating with mathematicians, physicists, and students to build some of the most ambitious theoretical frameworks of the modern age. Today, Stephen Hawking is remembered as both a pioneering scientist and a cultural icon, admired not only for his contributions to science, but for his defiance of expectation, his commitment to truth, and his extraordinary ability to inspire. And his genius lay not only in what he discovered, but in what he made us question, and most of all, in what he made us imagine. What do you think of Stephen Hawking? Was he the greatest scientific communicator of our time and a man who defied fate itself, or was he a brilliant theorist whose fame sometimes eclipsed the complexities of his work? Please let us know in the comment section. And in the meantime, thank you very much for watching.